Welcome to a Paycheck Away Game Master training. This is part 3 of our video series, and it prepares you for some common gameplay scenarios that can come up during play. We've made these videos as helpful as we can, but please make sure you study the Game Master Guide before playing. It has almost everything you need to run a game successfully. You already know the game goal if you've been following along, but in case you missed it, the goal of a Paycheck Away is for players to use a combination of choice and chance to earn enough money to get themselves and as many of their fellow players as possible out of homelessness within 3 months. As in real life, opportunities will be constrained by their circumstances and by luck, good and bad. This is old news if you've been watching the other videos, but game masters are acting as a rule keeper, a township trustee, and the facilitator of the game. You really get to do whatever is necessary to keep the game moving. With that said, we want to prepare you for some of the common scenarios that come up when people play. So are you ready? I'm going to show you a series of 10 scenarios. Just pause the video after each one. Check the Game Master Guide to figure out what steps you need to take, and then repeat. Okay, here we go. Scenario 1. It's the end of month 1. What does Steven need to do related to his substance abuse problem? Go ahead and pause. Ready for the answer? Okay. First, you should have Steven roll to see if he gets into a treatment program. Space is really limited, so he needs to roll a 6. You'll also need to adjust Steven's health tokens. If he has been living on the street, he'll lose another token. Once you've done these 2 things, you can continue play. Alright, here's another scenario for Steven. It's the end of month 2. Steven did not get into a substance abuse program in month 1, and he's lost all but one of his health tokens. What does Steven do? Go ahead and pause. Steven is clearly not in a good situation. First off, have him roll to see if he gets into a treatment program. If he doesn't get in, he'll have to hand over that final token, which eliminates him from play. Gameplay now continues for the other players. Scenario 3 is for Martin. In this round, a job as greeter at a big box store opens up and it's on a bus line. Can Martin apply? Yes, he can apply. The job is not very demanding and it's one of the few jobs Martin can handle. If he doesn't recognize this, you should encourage Martin to apply. If others apply, have the players roll for the position. The highest roll wins. Then continue play, adding transportation costs to Martin's bills. Scenario 4. It's the end of month 1, and Willa and Dave are out of money for groceries. What should you do? This can happen to Willa and Dave pretty easily if Dave does not get a job in the first month. You should first ask them what options they see for themselves. If needed, you can remind them of the township trustee's role. If they apply for relief, you must decide whether or not to extend the funds. You can also have them roll to see if they get into the homeless shelter. Otherwise, you'll need to subtract some health tokens if they do not pay for enough food for their family. Scenario 5. Janine is still in the homeless shelter at the end of month 1. She's figuring out her bills, including groceries. What do you need to remember? Since Janine is staying in the shelter, she does not have to pay for groceries, only hygiene bills. Her SNAP, or food stamps card, becomes something she can sell, although this is illegal. Of course, Janine will still have to roll a 1 or a 4 to stay in the shelter for a second month. Time for scenario 6. Willa and Dave draw a chance card providing daycare expenses for a month. What can they do with it? Remember, Willa and Dave have a 16-year-old who can take care of their childcare. They can offer the card to Janine or Martin, who both have small kids to watch. If Willa and Dave don't recognize this opportunity, you can point it out. Scenario 7. Janine is working as a waitress and it's her first pay period. She earns a base salary of $160. How do you calculate her tips and how much does she owe in childcare? First off, You should have the person playing Janine calculate her tips. That's not your job. In case she forgets, remind her that tips are calculated by rolling the dice. The specific guidelines will be on the jobs card. For childcare, Janine is going to have to pay $120 per week per child for childcare. That equals $480 for 2 weeks of care. Scenario 8. A player draws a choice card asking players to decide whether or not to buy new uniform shirts for work. Which players does this apply to, and what should you remember? Choice cards must be acted on by every player they apply to, so every player who has a job has to make this decision. If any player currently working doesn't buy the uniform, they lose their job. We're almost done. Scenario 9. It's the end of month 2, and all players are trying to get into permanent housing. Which options are potentially possible for each? Take your time and think about this one. Martin has the most limited options of any character. His only outcome is going to be subsidized housing in 99% of games because of his disability. Stephen must complete substance abuse treatment before he can do anything else. Then he is going to need either $1,500 for permanent housing on a bus line or subsidized housing. Willa and Dave and Janine are both going to need around $1,500 to afford an apartment. Janine needs to live on a bus line. Willa and Dave don't. They can also both try to get into subsidized housing. All right, this is it. Scenario 10. It's the end of month 1. Stephen's on the street, Janine and Martin are in the shelter, and Dave and Willa are in a motel. What actions do you guide here? Martin should first roll to try and stay in the shelter, then roll to see if he can get into subsidized housing. Stephen needs to roll the dice to get into a treatment program. If he happens to have $1,500 already, he can try for permanent housing, but the landlord can refuse. Willa and Dave will probably want to roll the dice to get into the shelter or try for subsidized housing. Janine is the same as Stephen, minus the substance abuse problem. She can roll to stay in the shelter, roll for subsidized housing, or apply for permanent housing if she somehow already has $1,500 in cash. The one advantage Janine has over Stephen is that she, besides the substance abuse problem, is that she is already in the shelter. Remember, the Game Master Guide also has tips and strategies for each profile in the back. The housing rules we have discussed are printed on the game board and in the guide. The chance cards that come up are completely random, but choice cards must be played by everyone who fits the parameters. Lastly, jobs and income are always shifting. Make sure players are using their budget sheets to track their income. I hope you found these scenarios helpful. There are plenty more resources to help you out, too. Video number 1 has some tips for being a game master, and video number 2 shows you how to start the game. As long as you remember to study that Game Master Guide before playing and refer to it during play, you should be fine. Good luck!